Welcome to Downtown Sports. My name is Downtown Stephen Brown, and in today's video, guys, what are the Toronto Maple Leafs' plans heading into this year's trade deadline? So there's a little bit of a thread here from Account for Hockey tweeting out some radio quotes from Chris Johnson on the Fan 590 from April the 5th. He didn't want to quarantine either when it was 14 days, but ended up waiving to go to Montreal, and that is in regards to Eric Staal. So I do think that that is something to watch, and he's talking about the Maple Leafs being interested in Kyle Palmieri, and him not necessarily maybe not wanting to go to a Canadian team, but Chris also adds, I really do believe Toronto will have at least one new forward for sure as of Tuesday the 13th, if not two, and then we look for a goaltender. It doesn't seem at this point, barring some kind of injury or another situation cropping up, that they're at all interested in a defenseman, which might disappoint some of you. It disappoints me a little bit because I think that there is a need for an upgrade on that third pair, someone who you can trust a little bit more than what the Maple Leafs have trusted Travis Dermott and Zach Bogosian to do this season. But over the last couple of games, Travis Dermott showing a little bit more promise, showing a little bit more engagement in the offensive zone. So maybe that's something to look for in the next coming weeks. I mean, it's basically a tryout for Travis Dermott at this point because I don't see what he can do. I don't see what Dermott can do to not get leapfrogged by Rasmus Sandin next season, or even possibly when Sandin gets back from injury. But the quote continues, I think they'd like a forward that has a bit of an ability to play playoff hockey. Okay, that's going to excite a lot of people because playoff hockey is rugged and tough. A bit more rugged, maybe, than just a skill player. I think Palmieri fits the bill. I think that Nick Foligno fits the bill if Columbus decides to move him. If it isn't one of those two guys, they're going to have to maybe recalibrate their expectations. But I want to add some perspective onto a forward that can play playoff hockey, someone who is tough and rugged. A lot of people have talked about the Toronto Maple Leafs adding another forward and what that forward needs to be, and everyone has come to the conclusion that they want another Zach Hyman. I'm for it. You're for it. Everyone who's in their right mind would want another Zach Hyman. What makes Zach Hyman so good is that he's relentless on the puck when he doesn't have it. He's going to go in there and he's going to get it back each and every time. And that is the type of player that you want, especially on a team like the Maple Leafs this season, who are a very, very heavy forechecking team. And Jordan providing us some perspective here on some 5-on-5 forechecking stats this season. Zach Hyman, the top of this group, but below him, Nick Foligno, who Chris Johnson mentioned is on the Maple Leafs' radar, but just below him, Taylor Hall. Maybe you don't think of Taylor Hall as a type of player who goes in there and gets it back when your team doesn't have it, but the stats suggest otherwise. If we're looking at the Buffalo Sabres offensively with Taylor Hall on the ice, they're an above-average team. Without him, they are abysmal. One of the worst teams in the entire league. When we're looking at them defensively with Taylor Hall on the ice, they're a little bit better than average. When we're looking at them without Taylor Hall on the ice, they're a little bit closer to average. How bad the Buffalo Sabres are this season is completely destroying the narrative around Taylor Hall. He is a good player on a very, very bad team. And the thing that people are forgetting about Taylor Hall is that Buffalo doesn't get to choose where they're trading this guy to. Hall gets to choose the destination because of his no movement clause. So on the off chance you end up being Taylor Hall's preference, it would be stupid not to submit an offer. The Sabres have absolutely zero leverage in trading this guy, and because of that, the team who gets him is going to get him at an absolute steal. And we got another follow-up with Frederick Anderson here from Chris Johnson. Sheldon Keefe says he has no concern that Frederick Anderson is done for the season. The goaltender recently had another follow-up appointment with doctors. We haven't seen him on the ice playing since March the 19th. So either that's smoke and mirrors, or we're not going to see Frederick Anderson get placed on long-term injured reserve. And that's okay. There are other options when it comes to adding at the deadline. The Maple Leafs should have enough cap space to add a face cap hit value of about $2 to $2.5 million, and I will show how that is possible a little bit later in the video. And if they were to get 50% salary retained, they can stretch that $2 to $2.5 million to $4 to $5 million, and if they were to get double salary retained, which is perfectly legal, like I showed in my trading for Taylor Hall video, which I will leave linked above the screen if I haven't already. They can stretch that 4 to 5 million into 8 to 10 million, which is how it's possible to acquire a guy like Taylor Hall. And you guys are familiar. The Leafs PR Twitter account tweets out once every day that they've recalled all these guys and sent all these guys down. But over the most recent road trip, they've gone to even leave guys like Adam Brooks and Timothy Liljegren on the active roster on game days. And they did not have to do that, because in doing so, it is costing them cap space. And in costing them cap space, they're going to have less to work with at the trade deadline. So whatever they have planned at this year's trade deadline, they know that it's not going to take any more than $2 to $2.5 million in cap space to get it done. But just because they have that flexibility does not mean that they should not explore trading a guy like Frederick Anderson. And I know that I've been really on this train, and it's pissed a lot of people off. Jonathan Bernier is a player who is more than likely going to be dealt at this year's trade deadline, and you need to swallow your pride. You need to look at the .918 save percentage. You need to look at the .896 save percentage that Frederick Anderson has. I'm not talking about the first 3 years that he was here in Toronto. Absolutely amazing in those first 3 seasons. You need to look at the situation right now. Jack Campbell, his health is in question. Frederick Anderson, his health is in question, but his play is also in question. The Maple Leafs cannot continue only having one goalie. And even if Anderson were to come back and be healthy, his play is still going to be in question. Now, Michael Hutchison, if the Maple Leafs were just going to ride with him until now, into the end of the regular season, that would be okay, but I do not want to have to imagine him starting in the playoffs, okay? I understand that he won 2 playoff games with the Colorado Avalanche last year, but I do not want to be in that position. Michael Hutchison's numbers have been okay this season, but the idea of him starting long-term still scares the crap out of me. And if you're looking at it from the Red Wings' perspective, okay, we save a little bit of money, we get a draft pick, we get a prospect, Bernier is a UFA anyway, and you know what? If we really, really like this guy, which I assume they would, he's playing well for them, we can just re-sign him in the offseason anyway. And in making a move like this that's on the screen right now, with the Red Wings retaining 50% and taking on Anderson's full contract, like I said, they'd be getting a pick and a prospect out of it. I'm not opposed to throwing in a second here and like a C-level prospect. I think that would be worthwhile for them. The Maple Leafs would be able to add $3.5 million more in face cap hit value. You partner that with the already $2 to $2.5 million that they have, and that gives the Maple Leafs more options, because now they don't have to rely on another team being the middleman in a double salary retained trade that would see you acquire a guy making as much as Taylor Hall. And you also get a goaltender who's performing adequately, who can play behind Jack Campbell. Now, another quote here from Account for Hockey. Chris Johnson implied that Matthews and some of the other Leafs would be upset if Anderson was traded in season, and that it's a complicating factor for the Leafs as they approach the deadline. Now, Chris Johnson, I don't believe, specifically said Matthews. I think that in 31 Thoughts, they said that some of the top Leafs in the dressing room would be upset. So you assume Matthews, you assume Marner, you assume those guys. But to that, I would say, if they're upset that the Maple Leafs are considering this as an option, it's because their options are really tight, because none of you took discounts. If you wanted to play on a team with your friends for the rest of your career, to ensure that, you can't have it both ways. You can't have it both ways. You can't have your money and your friends too, okay? If that would be the case, if trading Anderson would upset them, it's them that's being unreasonable in this situation. Grow up. Grow up. Whatever the easiest path is to the Stanley Cup, that's the one that we should be moving towards. And if it makes it easier to make upgrades to this team by dealing this guy, you do it. You do it. And I know that it hurts some people's feelings because he was so good in those first 3 seasons, but this is now, not then. The best possible situation here, and it's always been this, is that he comes back, is healthy, and plays like the Fred that we all knew and loved. But that is so far from being something that you can rely on, that it's a shitty situation all around, and it's not fair of them to make it more difficult. If we're looking at guys who have maybe been linked to the Maple Leafs over the last couple of days, I threw in a bonus name there, and that is Scott Lawton at the top. And don't worry, we're going to take a look at the standings a little bit to contextualize why a guy like Scott Lawton would even be available. But if he is, that is the type of guy that I would include Alex Kerfoot in the trade. I would add other assets on top of it. That is the hockey trade that I would want for Alex Kerfoot. Tanner Pearson, we've talked about before. Darren Dreger noting that the Vancouver Canucks might be close to a contract extension with him, so not sure how available he is, but he is an effective middle six forward. He will jump in on the forecheck, and he will score you some goals. Not my first choice, not my first option. Taylor Hall, we've already discussed. Nick Foligno, he does fit that description of a big, rugged, and tough forward who you would want on your team come the playoffs, but I don't know how much better he really is than a guy like Pierre Engvall. He's a different player than Pierre Engvall. He certainly does lay the body, is more physical than Pierre Engvall, but I don't know how much better he really is than him. Kyle Palmieri is a very hard player to interpret because his advanced analytics are garbage, like god-awful. You need to be able to facilitate a very specific role for him. He's amazing at shooting the puck. He's a great goal scorer. He probably will score you 20 to 25 goals in a regular season, but I don't really see the point in acquiring this guy when the Maple Leafs already have players on their roster that need to be heavily sheltered in order to be effective. He's just not at the top of my list. But if you're looking for another shot option on the power play, I mean, Kyle Palmieri would definitely be that. We care about this number on Cap Friendly, the projected cap space, because then we can prorate that over the course of how many days there are in a season, and we can use that number to tell us the face or the cap hit or the annual average value that the Maple Leafs could then acquire at the trade deadline. So right now it's at 485,162, but you got to take a look at the roster that is considering right now at the moment, and that's with a roster that has Adam Brooks on it instead of Alex Galchenyuk. What we're going to do is we're going to take Brooks's face cap hit value of $725,000 and we're going to divide it by how many days there are in the regular season. This year, there's 116 of them. And then what we're going to do to find out the number that we can add to this projected cap space is that we're going to multiply the number that we get after dividing by the amount of days that are left in the season. So right now, there are 31 days left in the season. If you multiply that number by 31, you're getting 193,750. So now that you have this number here, which is just 193,750 plus the number here, is what you can do is you can divide this number by the amount of days that are left in the season, so 31, and then you can multiply it by 116, and this will give you the face cap hit value that the Maple Leafs can add to this team after they've removed Adam Brooks from the roster. $2.5 million. So after subtracting and dividing and multiplying, we find out that the Maple Leafs can add to a roster that has 20 players on it right now, a cap hit with a face value of $1.49 million. But obviously, if you're acquiring a player, someone is coming out of the lineup. You know, a lot of people would immediately point to Alex Kerfoot, but to that, I would say Alex Kerfoot is not a cap dump. He's an asset, and the only way that I'm trading Kerfoot is if I can get a hockey deal for that player, or know that I can replace him with a player who plays a similar role. And that's why we touched on Scott Lawton a little bit earlier in the video. Even a guy like Nick Foligno, Kyle Palmieri a little bit less so. He doesn't play the same role that Kerfoot plays at all. If you're adding a player just as good or better than Zach Hyman offensively, then I think you need to bump one of the old guys out of the lineup. If you're looking at a hypothetical lineup like this, the only player that's on the market who is 100% yes better offensively than Zach Hyman is Taylor Hall. The next closest guy that we've talked about anyway that have been linked to the Maple Leafs is a Kyle Palmieri, but even him, he needs to be sheltered. Not much different than Wayne Simmons or Joe Thornton. He's probably a little bit better, a little bit more effective than those players, but does that justify the asking price from the Devils? I mean, what's it going to cost you to get this guy? Is the difference between those players really worth it? You're going to have to shelter him either way. If it's a guy like Nick Foligno, I don't think that he's good enough offensively to be in that top six. And he's definitely not as good defensively as Zach Hyman. So if you're not getting a player that is good enough to bump Joe Thornton out of the top 6 offensively, that means that you're going to have to leave Zach Hyman in the top 6. And if you're leaving him in the top 6, then that takes him away from that shutdown line. And if you're not acquiring a guy good enough defensively to justify leaving him in the top 6, I think that overall that hurts the Maple Leafs. I've been saying this for months. The Maple Leafs need to call up Nick Robertson here. You know why? Because he's dirt cheap and he's free. And he's right down the road. Unless it's Taylor Hall, I don't know how you can justify spending assets without at least giving Robertson a chance. Which is why I'm so confused as to why they seem so hellbent on not acquiring another defenseman. They have enough forwards. They have the flexibility. They have depth forwards. What they don't have is a defenseman to replace a Jake Muzzin or a TJ Brody if they were to go down to injury, because they don't trust Travis Dermott or Zach Bogosian to hold the newest iPhone even. To be fair to Dermott, he's played better the last couple of games. He's shown a little bit more creativity in the offensive zone. We've noticed him doing more positive things. He saved a goal off the goal line. So maybe the only deadline acquisition the Maple Leafs make, or the only smart one if they can't get Taylor Hall, is calling up Nick Robertson and just going for it. They should still do that goalie thing, though. That's going to be it for this video, guys. Make sure to like the video if you did, like and subscribe for more, because more is always on the way. But guys, remember, just remember that the Toronto Maple Leafs sputtered for a little bit, but order is slowly being restored. They are 3rd in the league in points percentage right now.